Welcome back to the next episode of The Next Marketing with AJ, as in me. Today, I want to welcome my dear friend, my mentors, and one of the first few persons who I have known who kind of started the world of point of care marketing, who is also a great chef, who runs a restaurant, an RJ, a DJ, and a business person as well. Want to welcome Ritesh Patel, who's a senior digital health partner at Fin Partners, and he would kind of unearth and share what's next in the world of point of care marketing, a category which has been expanding at such a fast pace since the pandemic. Excited to bring this episode to you today. So I want to welcome Ritesh to today's episode. Thank you, Ritesh, for making time for this show.
My pleasure, Harshit. It's great to see you. It's been a while.
For all the listeners, we want to just give a little introduction about yourself, because I know I would not do justice to your introduction.
Oh, gosh. Sure. As you said, we've known each other a while. Ritesh Patel. I currently work at a place called Fin Partners. We're a privately held agency marketing services company. I focus only on healthcare. That's what I've been doing for the last 10 years. When we met, I was at Ogilvy Health, which is where I started the advertising side of my career, if you wish. And before that, I got into this mad healthcare industry working for Inventive Health, which is a sort of a mini holding company of advertising agencies, PR companies, and a CRO. So the background, in healthcare started about 2010. And, trial by fire, trying to digitize a CRO, that was interesting. And here I am at Fin, and I run the global health practice. So we're building out basically a digital health agency.
Before we talk about health, let's talk about something else. Should we talk about the restaurant business? How you doing?
Yeah, so I everybody sort of yells at me because I tend to take on things for a passion rather than actually doing it for money, right? So the passion project started about 15 years ago. Where I live here in Montclair, New Jersey, there were a couple of Indian restaurants, but they weren't really that good. And I got tired of crappy Indian food. So we decided to open a restaurant, and now there's 3 of them. The idea really was around just tired of what was being thrown at the Americans as Indian food was really Americanized Indian food. So the world has changed a lot. We've got so many new restaurants and things in town now and around the area. But when we did this, we were the only ones around. So it was good.
I think let's start with, what do you think is point of care? How do you define point of care before we go into details? Because I've seen point of care being addressed from multiple directions, from a patient point of view, what it is commonly known as, and from an HCP point of view as well. So how do you define point of care?
Well, maybe we should go into the history, right? So look, point of care really came out of point of purchase, which is the old traditional CPG model, right? How do I impact somebody at the moment in time that they're going to buy something, right? So that whole idea of point of care started with some of these big agencies that were looking at, okay, at that point when you are going to do something, using the CPG model of either at the supermarket shelf where I can message you and give you a voucher and whatever else, or, when I'm standing at the till, I can offer you something special. Those kinds of concepts were already there, right? So there was a lot of noise going on. And I had a guy who worked for me at Ogilvy Health who sort of, was part of that whole consulting world. And when he joined the healthcare group, we looked at, okay, is there a similarity or an adjacency to that kind of conversation? And that was in 2015. We decided, yeah, this is an interesting idea. There is a point of purchase or a point of conversation between the doctor and the patient at the time where the doctor is sitting with the patient. And so the original concept of point of care was, how do we message the doctor at the moment they're sitting with the patient, with the analogy being you're standing at the shelf at the supermarket and you're making a decision between this tin of baked beans and this tin of baked beans. What's the rationale and how do I do that? So that was the original 2015 when we got going. Point of care was the burgeoning EHR systems that were coming out there that had a capability. Some of them, like Practice Fusion, Doctor First, were allowing messages to be delivered to doctors at that point of care. And so that's how it started from a historical perspective, in my view. I'm sure there are others out there who may dispute that, but that was our view of how we started the point of care group at Ogilvy Health when we got into this crazy stuff that we started to do.
How it has evolved from then, but it was like 2015, 2016 to now.
So I've seen it evolve into more of a connective tissue for those who do it really well, right? Of how I manage the patient and the doctor conversation and relationships with the right messages at the right time. Originally, our messaging was very much around how do we engage the doctor? We want to make sure the doctor is, one, aware of the product that is applicable, has the safety and efficacy profile that is perfect for this patient. Now it's more than that, I think. And I think part of it is also in the early days of point of care, people used to see it as a media buy when it wasn't necessarily it. The hardest thing, I think, that the early practitioners had to convince the marketers was that this wasn't your normal media buy. You're not just putting some numbers in a spreadsheet on a flight plan and saying, I've now connected to the doctor, right? I think that's grown as well. And that's sort of changed the mentality a bit, where it's now become integral of an overall sort of campaign that you may have to do.
Very interesting. And so it is kind of getting closer and closer to the point where it matters the most.
Correct.
So it started to reach physician when he is in that moment. Now the expectation is for a physician to do that action as well, right? Which translates to a business outcome, right?
Yeah.
Which is very interesting. So what are the challenges have you seen that the life sciences organizations they face while executing these initiatives?
I would say the biggest detriment to this is measuring this as a media buy, and also measuring this with an ROI that is unreal. I think those two things are the things that are standing in the way of point of care being an integral part of a marketing mix. Let me explain. The industry has been driven by media. The media industry is only measured on click-throughs and engagements of some sort. You can't apply building a brand to click-throughs. You can't apply changing behavior to click-throughs. You can't provide engagement with a brand or a product with a click-through as the only measure. So I think one of the biggest challenges is talking to marketers and getting them to change the model around how they measure this capability. It's more about building a brand over a period of time with a customer, with messaging that's consistent of the brand at the moment in time they need it, right? So this is a drip thing. It's not a let's blast it and let's get as many click-throughs as we can, which is one of the biggest issues we have, I think. It's a misnomer. And I blame the media agencies for most of that because that's how they're measured. It's not their fault. That's how they're measured. So when they can't do that, they won't use this kind of tool set. The second thing I think is the model is based on if I spend $1, I want a prescription straight away. And that doesn't work either. You get a lot of people that are really big into NPI level measurement. But I ask a marketer, well, what do you do with that? And they say, well, we give it to our analytics guys and they can see prescription lift and whatever. But it's not measured the right way. They measure it right there and then. This is a long tail game. This is a build your relationship with the customer in a place that they're engaging, but it's a long tail. You won't get a result within a month. You get a result within 6 months, a year, but then you'll get the results. It's a traditional brand building tool set, but they've made it into a media tool set, right? And I think that's the biggest problem that we have.
Can you draw a parallel about this from any other industry?
Yeah, but I think, I always go back to my analogy is the old billboard days, right? We're still spending a massive amount of money on out of home. Well, why do we do that? Well, if I have 1 million people walking past my billboard in Times Square, apparently I'm a marketing genius, right? It doesn't do much. How do you measure it? Tell me that you have a click-through on a billboard, right? You don't. What you're doing is building a brand in front of a bunch of people. Let's assume of the 1 million people that walk past that billboard, 1,000 buy your product, but they won't buy it today. They'll buy it 2 days from now, 6 days from now. And it's part of an overall mix. So as a marketer, I'm okay with an overall marketing mix, a messaging brand building mix that includes billboard, even today in out of home. And I'm perfectly fine by not being able to measure it, right?
What do you see as next for point of view?
I really think it's a content thing. I think point of care needs to break out of the media buy, the CPM or the placement of, and it needs to start looking at the overall mix of a marketing program, and then how is this channel able to build your brand and engage with your customer in a meaningful way with relevant contextual content at the moment in time they're looking for it. I think it's more of a hyper personalization engine rather than a media buy. And that engine can be used for all manner of content that could be created and put into the channel in a way that is maximizing the content capability that we have. So it really needs to become a mix of content and media, but as I said, I call it a hyper personalization engine. Part of the miss here on point of care is that it is siloed, but if you can take the data and say, look, here are the prescribers who saw our messaging and over the last 6 months. Here are the ones you're calling on. But look, here are the ones you're not calling on. And yet they're seeing a lot of impressions or they're seeing a lot of content. We should start calling on these people because there's obviously interest or capability of doing something with our product. So the data layer is very important at the beginning, who we're targeting, during managing the mix and making sure that we're talking to the right folks, and then post connecting it to, it's not a prescribing system. Don't connect it to your, IQVIA database. Connect it to Viva and say, how am I going to now talk to these customers who are raising their hands, right? We don't do that at the moment. I think that's really important.
What percentage of brands do you see really using point of care the way it can potentially be used?
It's small, it's tiny compared to the media spend that you see, particularly on endemic and non-endemic platforms, both branded and unbranded. I think the market's different. I think the Big 10 are still struggling with this medium. They still haven't figured out, and they're relying too much on their agencies to figure this out for them. And they're putting it into the media agencies bucket, whose incentive and measurement is completely different and the opposite end of what point of care does, I think, in my humble opinion.
So let's take a break from the questions and have something interesting. We call it like a rapid fire round. What's the best campaign you have seen which used point of care in the best possible way?
I can't mention the client, but it was for a product that was competing in the diabetes space that had two behemoth competitors spending, completely outspending them, particularly here in the US on the DTC side on TV, branded TV ads. And the way that they use point of care to completely disrupt that and gain market share without having to go toe to toe on TV, which is what the other two guys were doing, was genius. I thought, we don't have, $50-60 million, to go spend on TV advertising. Let's go spend $5 million on point of care and really engage the customers and really showcase everything about this. I mean, they did do it properly, from the product information to the safety efficacy profiles based on patient profiles, all the way to financial services and copay cards for those who couldn't afford it. A complete continuum messaging, which is very interesting.
Which is the next country that you see that will emerge as a big spender in the point of care messaging space?
You look at places like Singapore and Australia and New Zealand, they're trying very hard. But I think if you looked at the next big country, I think the UK may be the one. I think they're doing a good job on building out the infrastructure. Allscripts is all over the place in many trusts at the moment. And once you have the capability of messaging, I remember Germany, there was only one company, I think Infomix or someone like that, who were able to do point of care messaging. Once those countries digitize and actually put everything together, Germany, UK, France, I think that's when things will change and your ability to then message will be there. But I think it may be different. The messaging capability will be there, but the kind of messaging you'll be able to do will be different compared to the US, is my opinion.
No, I agree. And so last one is, what's the most interesting compliment that you've ever received from a client?
Gosh, that's an interesting question. The most interesting compliment, I was able to feed the entire marketing department of Allergan one day with curry, and they thought that was the best thing that they've ever done in their entire careers, was when I brought in chicken tikka masala, aloo gobi, some naan bread, some rice, and a little thing of lamb vindaloo for the marketing department as part of our opening. And they still remember it to this day. When you talk to, I ran into somebody the other day and they said, that food you brought in was incredible. What about the marketing campaign I did?
At least they remember.
Yeah, at least they remembered, right? Exactly.
How do you see role of pharmacists, right? The new HCP evolving. They're also kind of doing most of the similar things as a physician does in a different or a limited way. Do you see them also playing a big role in how brands would like to reach them through point of care?
The three people that have been maligned or not reached in any way, shape, or form are the NPs, the PAs, and the pharmacists. We always focus on the physician, right, in this point of care world. But the NPs and PAs absolutely play a massive role. If you go to any GP here, the NP primarily does all the work, right? And the GP comes and says, okay, what happened? Everything okay? 2 minutes later, you prescribe something and you leave the office, but you've spent 15 minutes with the nurse practitioner. So the NPs and PAs are important. I think the role of the pharmacy in the United States is changing dramatically. It's going towards a very much a European model, where the basic GP kind services, you'll be able to go into a Walgreens or a CVS or an independent community pharmacy and be able to get them. And I know that, one of the big retailers is rolling out Epic in all of their pharmacies as well, so they can connect to the hospital systems, right? So I think there is a massive opportunity. Here are the two things to watch out for, though. Right now, there is no incentive or there is no method to measure a pharmacist at a retail pharmacy if it's a chain like a CVS or Walgreens, because their model is all about filling the bottles. It's not about engaging with the customer. I'm not really going to do much if my incentive is not there. If I'm being measured on how many pills I put in a bottle and how many bottles I dispense, I'm not going to engage with the patient. Walgreens is trying to shift that, and I think that'll make a major change.
And yeah, we are nearing the end. So what is that one message you would like to give to our agency and brand friends? How to use point of care medium in its ideal way?
So you've got to really think differently and think through, what are you trying to achieve? This is a great channel for relevant contextual content to be served at a moment in time that it should be served. And then measure the long tail. Don't measure it for this month versus last month. Those are some of the things I would suggest that they'll start looking at.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Ritesh, for your time. And I'm
My pleasure.
Will find it very encouraging and motivating to learn about this channel. And hopefully it will not be seen as part of the media plan, but as a separate point of care plan for all brands moving forward.
Yeah, totally agree. Thank you very much, sir.
The only way I would define something as a failure is if you don't know why it didn't work. right? If you never take a risk and don't try something new so that you're learning, that's not how you're going to be successful in the market. The market is always changing. Our customers are always changing. So I try and reset that mindset that, if just because something doesn't have the outcome that you expect doesn't mean it's a failure. It's only a failure if you can't explain what happened.